Hello, hello. Welcome back to Horizon Insights. We are hosting a fantastic panel discussion today with the International Association of Women, and super excited to have people joining us listening in live. We host these sessions about every other week, sometimes weekly. And I have found that the conversations that we have during these panel discussions are authentic, they're engaging, they're educational, they're supportive. And so your hour here with us today will not be wasted. We are going to dive into some great topics and really hope you'll walk away feeling better connected, better supported, and ready to go tackle those big projects and lead those teams, right? We're talking leadership today. So before we dive into meeting our panel, I love to do a quick round of what I call housekeeping. To kick us off, I will introduce myself first. I'm Megan Bizzuto. I'm the president here at IAW and have the pleasure of hosting conversations like this across all of our platforms, but also driving a lot of the work behind the scenes with the IAW team and helping support this incredible community of women. This platform, so if you're here watching us live, you will see right below me on the box, there's a box that says questions. That questions box is kind of like your chat box for us on the back end here. If you have a question, pop it in at any time. I often say that your questions are probably way better than my questions. And I want to make sure if you're here with us live that we maximize the time you get from us here today. So any question at any time, pop it in that questions box. But we also might ask some questions and ask for the audience to weigh in on some things. And so that questions box serves a place for that communication as well. So I always like to kick us off with asking people where they're joining us from. Let us know what you do, where you're from, and how you feel about this topic. If you have any questions in that questions box at any time, but would love to see those responses start rolling in soon. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, there is another section below me on the screen called attachments. And within there, you will find links to all of our speakers on LinkedIn. So I encourage you to continue this conversation. You can go connect with them, follow them. When you send that connection request, just put a little message on there that you're reaching out from this panel today so that we can tie it back to where we came from and give that context. I know Toni specifically likes to know where she actually requests that people put that in. So I see you laughing there, Toni, but we've got
something. Me too.
Yeah, but it's always helpful to set that tone of where'd you find me, right? What did you connect with? So one thing that I love to do after I listen to a great panel discussion, I go connect with the panelists and I either ask a follow-up question or I share like a quote or a comment that really resonated with me from the panelists. Mm-hmm. And that's how you can kind of stand out and get that connection going. So with that, I'm going to dive into introducing our panel today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and ask each panelist to kind of share a quick introduction. So let me start with Denise Cooper. Denise, welcome. I'd love if you could kick us off and share what it is you do and a little of your background.
Oh, my background is too long to talk about. Just know that I have been doing this work longer than probably all y'all are alive in terms of building leaders and really navigating how the workforce needs to be for the 21st century, and particularly focusing on the C-suite team itself on how to change what they think is what I call the dark ages of leadership into the enlightened ages of leadership, and doing it in a fast and furious, business environment, because it's changing all the time. AI has changed the speed and the rate and the way we work, and most leaders don't have the time or the inclination until something breaks to actually stop and say, okay, what's different about it? So I help them go through that process. I help them create the new way in which their culture is going to be, and in particular, how to set up their business so that they can be have bigger impact and success.
I love that bridge of kind of that old culture to new culture, right? And you're right. Things are changing so fast. Mm-hmm. It's hard enough to keep up with it all, but then to make sure that we're driving the right decisions as leaders and guiding people the right way to meet those outcomes, it's hard, right? And so having that support is invaluable. Next, I'm gonna circle over to Givonna Baker. Givonna, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'd love if you could share a quick intro with us.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Givonna Baker. I'll be changing my last name soon. No harm, no foul. Right. But I am an independent contractor with the government, and also in the private sector space. Prior to launching my own company 5 years ago, I served 22 and a half years in the military. And so leadership has been like my thing. I just love it because I see what it does for people, on both when you have good leadership as well as bad leadership. I enjoyed it so much. So I tell people that's why I went to school and I got a doctorate in public safety leadership, because I like just seeing, all the nuances of it and how they work it, weave it into the workplace to get those, desired objectives and, achieve mission accomplishment. So that's what I do. Again, this topic is, very passionate to me, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate that and love that you're here joining us with all this background and perspective. Finally, over to Toni DeVol. Hi, Toni. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. Can you share an introduction with us?
Yes. So I'm Toni DeVol. I currently work as a senior project manager for Conifer Health Solutions. Conifer enhances financial and clinical performance for healthcare providers through data-driven solutions and innovative technology. And my parents are both U.S. Air Force vets. My grandfather served in the Korean War, and then my husband's grandfather served in the World War II. So my leadership foundation was from my dad because he's a strategist, and I grew up reading all of his books in the library.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I'm here to just learn from everyone else, and I'm just excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Super excited. I feel like we have a perfect panel of different backgrounds and experiences, and those always lend well to amazing conversation. So we have, as I shared in the intro, I have questions prepared, but for anyone watching live, again, I invite you to share in that questions box. Let us know where you're joining from, as well as kind of your little introduction. Tell us more about yourself, but also this topic can be complex. I think that there's so much that comes with leadership, right? And when you look at high impact and cross-functional teams, it's complicated, right? There's no one easy solution. You have to be a strong leader to have success. And so for anyone listening, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, because that's how I find we get the maximum success out of these conversations. So I'm going to start down my list of questions, and I'm going to start kind of in the realm of breaking down silos and enhancing our collaboration between departments. And I like to start by looking at what I call a unified vision. And so I'm going to kick us off with kind of a question for all of you, and then we'll kind of separate into some individual conversations. But when we look at a unified vision, how do you ensure that all team members from all different departments align with a unified vision and common goals? What do you think is the key foundation or number one step there? Denise, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll circle around on this one.
Sure. Whenever I work with anybody, the first thing is that. And I think it's beyond the goals, and people often, particularly leaders who are trying to transition into the 21st century, have a hard time actually talking about what the vision is. And so a simple way for them is to say, so what is different about what we are doing then than we are now? And based on the business model, ask your team the same things. And then why does that resonate with them? What interest do you have? And I love the legacy question of asking your team members, so tell me, when all of this is said and done and you've moved on to your next role, what's the legacy that you want? What is it, the one thing that you want people to talk about you? Is it about your experience? Is it about your expertise? Or is it about the way you treated them or the way they remember? What are the stories that you want them to understand? And I think if you just spend, you don't have to do a lot of it, but I do think the part of the problem is that people feel like it's a one and done conversation. And it's not effective if you do it one and done. Because time, our brains are really heat-seeking missiles, looking for fear, looking for change, any of that. And we over time, it just gets kind of skewy. And so if you can do that, once every 6 months or so, and just talk to people and remind them, have them introduce. I work with a company. They actually had people introduce when they came into the company. So we would meet, do that nice, hey, this is Denise, Megan, how are you, blah, 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 blah. But they had to go over 4 questions, right? Who am I? Why am I here? What's the legacy I want? And finally, a question of, so in the future, how can I support you? And this is what I think I can do. And so what happens is people remember that. And each time you say it, it becomes more off the cuff, but it also aligns your vision and your behaviors to that.
Yeah, I love that question. What's the legacy you want to leave behind? I think that's such a great leading question for anyone on your team, right? To help tap into what's going to motivate them, what's going to drive them, how can you connect them to that vision, right? And when you understand what motivates them or drives them through what's the legacy you want to leave behind, you're gonna tap into some magical stuff. Givonna, I'm gonna flip over to you with the same question. Anything you do differently, or any other suggestions on ensuring that everyone, company-wide, different departments, understand, align with that unified vision and common goals?
I like what Denise mentioned about, the legacy and the vision, but, also, having come from a military background, we focus, purely on, concept of the operation. What are we trying to do? How do we get it done? What is your understanding of what we're doing and how we get it done? What do we need to have to get this thing done? And just tie everyone around that common vision and just go from there. Just start very basic, sand table or, desk side exercise. What are we doing? What do we need? What do we, have or what we don't have? Whatever we need to get the job done, and how are we going to get there? What's our time frame? Who got the lead on it? That's you. You own that, racy chart. Who got what? Those kind of things. Just, brainstorming, mapping everything out. That's just the, sometimes it can be too in depth for some people, but that's just the way I like to do things,
Right.
Concept of the operation. Let's talk about it. How do we get there?
Yeah, I love that. Toni, finally, and I know it can be tough to add when we've already had 2 great answers, but I'm going to put the question over to you and see if there's anything that you can add.
Let's say currently, I restate the end goal all the time. I'm always asking, for this project, I know we're doing this, but how is that going to look for you? So what does this look like? How does this relate to the current business? And then how do you want your future business to look like as well? So using what you guys have said, I'm going to have to start adding in the legacy piece, but just asking people, what are we even doing here? Why are we even here right now?
Right. One thing that comes up over and over for me is communication, and making sure that communication is going both ways. So I might be speaking my vision or speaking a goal, but did everybody receive it? And can they repeat it back? I listened to this fantastic podcast the other day, and of course the name escapes me, but she was talking about how if you're rolling out a big change or a new project, or you have teams coming together, one of the critical points is, can people 2 levels below you on the org chart go explain the vision and mission the same way you explain the vision and mission, right? Have they completely understood? And the same thing goes for goals, right? If my goal is not clear enough, or it doesn't achieve the SMART framework, how do we know that the person that is responsible for execution is going to be able to actually execute and do it in a way that's going to produce the result that we're looking for? So I want to talk a little bit about communication frameworks. And are there any communication frameworks you found effective in promoting transparency and collaboration across departments? Givonna, I'm going to start here with you, because I feel like the military probably, your time in service probably lends itself to some communication framework that's already there, right? It's in place. So I would love your perspective on communication frameworks.
So yeah, the military communication was a big deal, especially when it, came time for exercises and understanding that everyone was on the same page as far as, how we were going to get the mission accomplished. But within the civilian workspace, or the contracting workspace, I've relied, on, all of those project management tools, from your project management institute, from the PMBOK. And I love, the integrated project team, setting those up. And everyone where I currently support, they know, Dr. Vaughn, she's going to want to have an IPT, because I think it's so important to bring everybody to the table and have those discussions because, like we're talking about communication, everyone comes to the table with a different understanding of what has to happen, how we're supposed to get there. And, even aside from that, just what different words mean. You may have someone who's, completing a mission in Hawaii. When they say a particular word, it means something totally different to us here in Virginia, So I love having, integrated project teams to lay those things out. Have an agenda, just go over, a glossary of terms for crying out loud. And then what we're trying to do, what are your challenges? And, even, once that's said and done, it just opens up, the communication. So that way everybody feels more comfortable sharing those things with you. People don't feel like, oh, I have a dumb question, or maybe it's been said already. I'll just wait and see if somebody else can. No, we're all here together. Let's set the, the rapport here within this integrated project team and, bring what you got to the table.
Yeah, I love that perspective of the integrated project team and having a place where there is no bad question, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all here to solve something, and I often tell my team, if something doesn't make sense to you, ask the question, because most likely it doesn't make sense to somebody else too.
Right.
And then you ask the question.
Right.
It's amazing. Like, you raise your hand and you ask the question that you think might be the dumb question. And then you see the head nod, and everyone had the same question.
You're like, I was thinking that.
I didn't want to say that one.
Right. So don't be afraid of asking the questions, right? And whether you're leading the team or you're on the team, right? That communication is so important to show, like, hey, I'm all in, but I'm really confused here. And that's right. If you're really confused, you're not going to make progress where you want to make progress. So, but I think as leaders, we also have to give that space where there's no bad question, and we're going to support and help you get to the place that you need to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, communication challenges can arise, especially when you start going department to department, right? Because one department might use these tools and another department might use these tools. So, Toni, I'm going to flip this question over to you. How do you address communication challenges that might come from, especially different department cultures, right? There's tool systems, but there's also usually little cultures that form within different departments. How do you address those challenges?
I ask the silly questions. I am that person who's always confused in meetings, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. I feel like nobody else here knows what you're talking about because you're the subject matter expert, and we're trying to get this information out from this process so we can all move forward. I do work in an integrated project team style, so there's a lot of different terms that are used between our onshore and offshore teams that onshore may use, like we're saying in Hawaii or Virginia, but someone else is not using that term. So I'm always asking, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? Why did you say that last meeting? How does that play out in an importance for anything? So anytime I'm confused, which is pretty much all the time, I ask a question.
I think I love that. I think that's such a great way to clarify what we're talking about, right? Even if you kind of follow, kind of not, you clarify whether it's for you and the team as well. But also giving credit to that subject matter expert, right? I'm the first to admit that sometimes I get very excited about certain topics and I start talking very fast and using words that like go over other people's heads. And so it's like that reminder of, hey, slow down. I didn't understand that, right? And it reminds me to go back and be more thorough, because just because I'm a subject matter expert doesn't mean you are. And when I break it down for you to understand, that's going to help us all align. And so that communication, those challenges often arise because we fail to answer those questions and slow down to get that understanding. And so if you're looking, and Denise, I'm gonna flip this question over to you as well. When communication challenges arise, because I'm guessing you've seen this a lot in a lot of the work you've done. And you mentioned when we kicked off, right, the different generation. We have so many different generations in the workforce. So even the differences between generations can trigger communication challenges. How do you address this?
Well, so let me step back a little bit here. The reason that we have communication challenges it all centers on one thing, and that's trust. Trust comes from the story that we tell in our head. So, I think in my bio it says that I'm an expert in conversational intelligence. And one of the things that people forget is that what you hear in your head is a compilation of what your past has said and what you think is happening. But that isn't necessarily what somebody else thinks. So there's a story there. And generally when there's a breakdown, you're pointed inside. What did I do? Why didn't they include me? What does that look like? Those kinds of things. And then instead of going, okay, well, maybe they weren't clear. Maybe they didn't have a good day. Maybe, and become more outward focused. The other is that when you're in an organization, because I do work in organizations more than as an individual coaching, so team dynamics is one of my specialties. One of the things we have to manage as an outsider looking in is the values of one team over another. So I'll give you an example that happens all the time. If one leader is conflict avoidant and isn't good at holding their people accountable, and they're on a cross-functional team, the people who are assigned to that cross-functional team will also learn, because their boss doesn't really follow up on it, that they don't have to follow up in that team. So now imagine that you've got another team leader or the project manager leader who is very much around accountability. You automatically are going to have clash. You're automatically going to have lack of transparency. And everybody's going to be in their feelings telling a story about why you ain't fill in the blank on it. And it just mushrooms until something or someone teaches them how to intervene. So most of the challenges arise because of trust and a lack of understanding of how to move through and keep people on a level of trust in and of itself.
I think you're smart. That point of trust and that internal dialogue, I think, makes so much sense. And so often, so you talked about the clash between the person who is not so great at accountability and the person who is. How do you bring them together to bridge that to have more productive outcomes?
So oftentimes it's not necessarily the project leader that can do that. It has to be their boss, because there's a peer-to-peer power dynamic that's sitting there. And so the team leader has to have enough skills to enable their boss to go to the peers. And I talk about this in one of the stories, Aiden, in my book, where Aiden had to rescue the team leader from a group of people who had been trained not to respond and not follow up. They would actually sit in the meetings and go, oh yeah, I'll get it done. Oh yeah, I'll see that. Oh yeah, and then didn't do it. So her project, which she's getting evaluated on, was failing. And of course, she's getting more upset. She's getting more angry, feeling like people aren't supporting her, feeling like people are lying to her, but she can't tell people you're a liar, right? Because it's politically incorrect in the organization. So he came in and helped her set up new ground rules inside of it and told the team. But he also went to the peers of those departments and said, we have to talk about this, because accountability of getting this project done is key, and it sits on your lap.
Yeah.
So if you're not holding your people accountable, if you're not talking to them about what's going on, if you're not, when those deadlines aren't coming through, you're not asking questions on why they're missing it, then this project is going to fail. Mm-hmm. And then he had to do, so all of this in an organization is really understanding the politics. And politics is not a dirty word. It is just simply how people relate and tell stories about what's happening there, which is culture, right? And the things that we make assumptions about and embrace in terms of how things get done here. So if you have a culture of not holding everybody accountable, then guess what? You're going to have higher conflict. You're going to have higher turnover. You're also going to have more projects failing, not being as innovative. I mean, there's a lot of things that come out of it. Did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I want to shift over to talking about different skill sets and how we can leverage different skill sets to drive innovation. Like, we know things are constantly changing, right? And so when we're working in companies on projects, like the driving innovation and solving problems becomes critical. And I find we're moving faster than we ever were before. So leveraging diverse skill sets and making sure we're maximizing people's people's strengths is gonna lend more positivity and support to that. Let's see. My questions froze. Givonna, I'm going to start here with you. When we look at bringing teams together, how do you identify and then leverage the unique strengths of each team member to foster that culture of innovation and change?
So what I like to do is, look at, the person's resume. And, I'm a very personable person anyway. So I love just, asking, hey, what do you want to do? What interests you? Why'd you study this? What did you learn? What do you do when you leave here, when you go home at night? I'm just a nosy kind of person. Like, what do you do? What interests you? What do you think can be done better here?
It's not nosy. I'm curious.
Yes, I'm super curious, inquisitive. But I like to, look at their resume, and say, okay, I know you came here to do X, Y, Z, but I like to see what you did prior to and what can be used or harnessed to make us better now. Mm-hmm. And not only that, in addition to that, what are you doing to better yourself for, your life after here? Don't just come to work and sit at the desk. What are you working on? Please be learning something, please.
Yeah. I like to ask the question, what resources or programs do you follow to develop your skills and
right
better? Because if someone can't answer that question, then I know they probably need support in helping find the right resources or the right programs, and making sure that there's this mindset of we always have things to learn, right? Mm-hmm. There's always new information. There's always changes in techniques. And so I love the curiosity piece, because that's how I think we also form trust and we form those connections that, yes, I know what you do. I know what you're good at, but tell me what else motivates you. Tell me what else drives you. What goes on outside of the office doors?
Yeah.
Because those things, just because we walk in the office and close the door doesn't mean that life is not happening and that we can just tune it out.
Exactly.
And so I think that getting to know people, genuinely getting to know people, can help to foster that culture of innovation and bring people together to have trust and have communication and be pushing people to the projects and the places that they're going to be most productive. Mm-hmm. Denise, do you have any processes that you've used that help to make sure that we're using everyone's skills effectively?
Well, yes. That's a longer story, but let me kind of narrow it down to just the leader itself. So when I'm working with newly promoted leaders or leaders who in particular who are taking over a new group or there's been some kind of change, the first thing I do is I want to give them an assessment. The assessment tells them what they're motivated by, how they impacted their communication style on the group, as well as how does their critical thinking line up between those two things. So why do they do what they do when they do what they do? Kind of thing. And I find that if you do it with the entire team, because there's the expertise, and that's what you know, but what's most important in the workplace is the application of what you know. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with your expertise. Right. It has to deal with how do you build trust? What motivates you? What demotivates you in a conversation? How does the impact of one person who you might be an introvert and it's 2:00 and you've been in meetings all day long, how are you going to show up at 3:00? Right? Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things. How do you give information to different kinds of people who are motivated or inspired differently so that they can receive it and hear it? I think it was Toni, I'm not sure, one of the other ladies said something earlier about when we're talking about vision, what does it look like when it's on the other side? How do we want to operate? What does that look, how do we operate? Not so much from the tools that we have, but the way you and I connect, talk about things. How do we talk about conflict? So it gives, and leaders are always like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Because it takes about 15 hour for them to do it and then another hour for me to help them see it. And then I give them a list of questions and ways to be that says, if you're going to be like this, your team is like this is what you hire. Because it's interesting. All companies hire against a preset culture. They don't know it. They think they're being very diverse, but when you assess them, the research demonstrates that you hire the same kinds of people, the same thinking kinds of people. And anyone who doesn't fit that mold is automatically rejected. I call it the organ rejection out of it. They're wrong. They don't fit. We don't do things like that around here, those kinds of things. And so those are ways in which we corral people to behave like we already behave.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I start with the assessment, then I start with a conversation, and then I try and get people to understand how the way they get inspired and motivated is used to apply their expertise to get work done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that the assessment that you talked through and how it gives reports back. But I think it's so true that even if we say we're hiring outside of our normal culture, right? There's certain things that we want people to fit the mold. We want it to be easy. We don't want the pot stirrers. We don't want the why. I love when I have people join my team and they ask lots of questions and kind of stir the pot in that, why do we do it this way? There's got to be a better way, right? But a lot of organizations are challenged by that because they don't want the challenge. They
Right.
go out for it, right? So one of the things that I love when I bring new people on my team is the different perspectives and how different perspectives can help with problem solving, right? Because often my perspective is my perspective, but if there's a problem and the four of us come together, we all have different backgrounds, histories, knowledge, skills that is gonna help to solve the problem. Toni, can you share any examples where having that mix of diverse perspectives has helped to solve a problem or led to a breakthrough on a team?
Yes. My first job out of grad school was working in a hospital in Harlem, and it was intense, and like in a great way, not in a bad way. It was just like a lot of knowledge. It was it's a research facility, so everyone is really pushing everyone to be the best that they could possibly be. And one of the teams that I was a part of was initiating bedside rounds for everybody. So this is the doctor, the nurse, the respiratory therapist, the nutritionist, the social worker, a resident, and anyone else that is wanting to be a part of it. They would round on a certain floor at a certain time of the day, so that way all the solutions would happen at one time. That patient was able to hear from the social worker who could tell them. The nutritionist could say, hey, they may not be able to follow this diet when they leave because they aren't able to have access to this type of food. Maybe we should start teaching them how to prepare meals while they're here instead of expecting them to be able to do this when they leave because they'll be back in a week. So that was amazing to watch the formation of what type of questions should we be asking, who should be on this team, and how long should this rounding take, and what should be involved in this rounding, so that way we're not adding things on and it just becomes like a checklist party. We're doing something that's meaningful and it remains in this process. So moving forward, it's something that is going back to legacy. It's a legacy, so we can continue to empower our patients to be the best when they're discharged.
I love that. I love that. Such a great example of something we probably can all relate to. Very powerful. Givonna, I'm going to flip over to you with a question. Any techniques that you have or use that encourage out-of-the-box thinking and creative problem solving?
I like, just simple, pulling everybody in, get from behind the desk, having those impromptu, maybe crescent-shaped meetings, bring your lunch or whatever, and just have a chill session where everybody's just talking stuff out. I love a whiteboard. If you want to draw, grab those markers and just get up there and scribble it out. When I was thinking about a particular instance when Toni was speaking, my first assignment out of the military, they put me over this little team to build a process for assessing systems and applications and building a migration process for getting them into the cloud or determining where they needed to be. I had no freaking clue. I was a logistician in the Army. I was like, why y'all get this to me? I'm like an app. I thought an app was something you only find at Applebee's. So here I am working with, an application engineer, a system engineer. I didn't know there was a difference. I just know I'm a business, But we got it done. We got it done. And so it was just, being vulnerable in that space in front of them, letting them know what my limitations were, and then having them do the same. Because I was a very strong and avid researcher. So as engineers, they like to go deep, but not necessarily wide. I was the wide. I was like, I got you. Bring it to me. Let's go in that rabbit hole. I got you. Give me all that goodness. We're going to give me all them carrots and we're going to come up with something good. So,
Yeah. I that's such a great example. And diving in over your head, right? But finding that common ground where you can still be productive and have really good outcomes. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but I just want to add to that. It's an underused technique to bring someone in like her, because when you're filled with a bunch of experts, they don't go wide.
Yes.
And they argue over the deep, right? And so finding the synergies, finding those threads that can be used in a more productive way or to fit the circumstance and not getting stalled. Bringing in people who don't understand all of this, right? Because 9 times out of 10, particularly when you're developing something, the people who are going to be end users don't understand your language.
Right.
So to have someone who doesn't understand all that you understand, ask the questions that no one in the room is asking, the obvious questions, does a couple things. One, it increases their ability to think outside of their narrow expertise. But 2, it leverages the skill of someone who is good at asking questions and seeing threads that pull through a particular project, pull them together and move it forward so that they don't get into analysis paralysis or expert battling and things like that. So I often encourage, put people on there, at least 2 people, so that they feel better as 3, that they have a place where they fit and they understand what their role is. And it's amazing how when you add people like Givonna on a team, how much more innovation comes out.
Absolutely. It's interesting. So I started my career in internal audit, and we would go into manufacturing locations and do a full end-to-end review. And we would talk to everybody specialized in their area, their department, but we also drew that picture of does what comes in the front door go out the back door correctly, right? And it's that when the 2 doors are not talking to each other, you still have to ensure that the process is working, and to have somebody who can help go wide and really see that full picture is so important. And taught me a lot in terms of understanding process and how process is so important, but also that like my process is here, but who's touching me here and who's touching me here, because that impacts everything.
And if somebody just takes this little nugget here, this 6-minute conversation that we've had, if you're looking to get promoted or move your career up inside an organization or over to another, learn to be that connector, that idea connector, and go out there and say, look, I may not know anything about it, but let me tell you, I know how to do what you're saying. I can see this end, and I can pull the strings this way. And because I'm here, it's going to get better. And you put in the right ground rules, and I'm telling you, it's one of the most powerful team cohesion strategies that improves the output of a team.
Right. I love that career nugget. I think it makes so much sense. And tapping back into that place of curiosity that we talked about before, right? There's no harm in going to somebody that you may not work with every day, but you might touch in different process, and just getting to know them, understanding, hey, do you have any bottlenecks? Is there anything I'm doing I could do better? But how can I support you? How can I support you to be more productive or more efficient? Or how can I help you? That curiosity and those conversations can be huge game changers for your career, because that's how you stand out as the person who's helping outside of just your day-to-day, right? And you gain this knowledge and buy-in from people outside of your own role. And that's how those big career things happen. So I want to talk a little bit about inclusive leadership, because practicing inclusive leadership helps us to really harness the power of diversity and different thoughts on our teams. And so I'll start just kind of basic, and Givonna, I'll start with you here. How do you practice inclusive leadership to harness the power of diversity within teams?
I would say the first piece for me is self-awareness, being aware of those biases that I may have, because everyone feels comfortable with people that look like them, but being mindful of, what it feels like to have been excluded, keeps me reminded of inclusivity, making sure that is there on the team. And, if I don't see it within my customer space, just saying, hey, sir or ma'am, it look, what about hiring some more, you know what I mean? And I mean, you just have to, there's no nice way to say it. You just got to say it.
Just got to say it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I work with a lot of different cultures. So with that awareness, knowing that if I'm talking about this example, cicadas, I'm asking some people in a call, hey, do you have any cicadas near you? And then I know some other people are like, what is a cicada?
Right.
Explaining what a cicada is, so that we can all have a full rounded conversation, because maybe someone who didn't know what a cicada is will then now share a different type of hibernated insect from their area, and we can have a conversation that is really involving everybody on the team and not isolating anyone, and they feel like I don't really want to go to that call because they're going to talk about things that I don't even know, and they're not even going to explain what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I love the cicadas.
Yes. And can I add one thing to that too? I think, one place that I worked at, it was my first gig as an independent contractor. And to me, it was basically like a little slice of the United Nations. It was in DC government. I had never seen such a more diverse workspace than there. But, just embracing all of the various holidays, I feel like they did a great job of acknowledging all the various different holidays and celebrating. And then just being able to, go to someone of that particular culture, hey, teach me, what does this mean? Or, what is that? And I mean, it's fun. And then sometimes you may also get nice little free gifts because,
that's how people celebrate, right? I think that's where, again, that curiosity comes into play. And really seeking to understand and learn people's backgrounds, experiences, cultures, like that's how we connect and build better teams, right? Mm-hmm. As leaders, to be inclusive, I think we have to be curious and have an understanding. If somebody on my team celebrates different holidays than I do, I should be aware of that, because I'm not gonna schedule a day full of meetings because it's not a company holiday. If it's something very important to them, right? I've missed a big piece of their culture, which doesn't help with trust necessarily.
Nope.
Denise, anything else you'd add here?
I can't tell you how many times that particular example of scheduling holidays on a person's sacred holiday.
I'm in a very diverse community.
Just something as simple as that.
Yep. But it's simple, but it's so easily missed, right?
I know. But
kind of
that was a good one.
The awareness of what's important to you, right?
Yeah.
It might be that that's your religion, but you're not practicing, so you might not even care that it's a holiday. But as leaders, if we want to build trust and we want to build engagement and we want people to be seen and welcomed and feel seen and welcomed, we have to acknowledge it. And if not, we're missing that mark of diverse teams build great outcomes, right? When you have more diversity in your room, when you're problem solving, you're gonna have better thoughts, you're gonna have better outcomes, you're gonna make more progress. But we have to build that culture first.
I also think that another way to spin this is that by asking questions, talking to people, learning about it, even if you don't, it's extremely dangerous to you psyche, because we don't come to work. No one shows up anywhere, whether it's a cocktail party, a cookout, work, to fail or to be embarrassed. Mm-hmm. And so to have to talk to someone who's very different than you are is a huge emotional burden that you have to get over in doing that. And oftentimes that's what keeps people from not doing it, because I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to fail. That's where you see the deflection when I schedule something on Rosh Hashanah or something like that, and I shouldn't have done that. You know what I'm saying? So now what you're dealing with is that embarrassment that I screwed up, and no one wants to be seeing it. And so I have to, I think sometimes we gloss over the emotional dangers that are inherent in trying to get to this level of inclusion. And the other piece that we gloss over, I think, sometimes, is that by not having some of the examples that Toni and you and Givonna mentioned in terms of how you're building your team or opening your team to ask questions that maybe someone else, or to share things that maybe they wouldn't have done in any other way, is trust is a funny thing. If I can't trust on this side, then I definitely am not going to trust on this side. So if I can't share with you something as simple as asking the question, what's a cicada? then you know I'm not going to ask you something about this process looks like it's failing.
Right.
Right? And so the two of them are intricately connected. And I think because we don't often talk about that, we gloss over it and we miss the fact that one is intricately connected to the other. And we have to do both if what we're going to do is truly achieve what we're talking about, which is that, exponential growth, that revenue line, that innovation, that being seen as a leader, that being a brand in the marketplace, that kind of thing. And if we're going to achieve that, then we have to understand that these are the same things. The symptoms are different, but the root cause is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned the symptoms, and that the podcast I mentioned earlier, she talked about how we often look at the symptoms, but we collect lists of symptoms, but we fail to address the problem. And same thing. Toni, you were going to add something
about the holidays. Because this happened to me this year. I'm like, why are there so many different holidays? I have a calendar for my teams. So I track your holiday and I track our holiday. I'm trying to get better at saying congratulations or celebrating holidays, but I'm just trying to start with tracking and acknowledging holidays and being aware of, I'm so sorry I scheduled a meeting and you were definitely out of office. It was not on my calendar, but now we have a shared calendar and we can all see we're all out at the same time.
Right. No, and that's when we make those mistakes, right? We acknowledge them and put something in place to prevent it going forward, right? I think that's one of the things with different cultures and getting to know that curiosity piece. We're not always going to get it right. We're going to miss things. And that's when taking ownership and clearly communicating, hey, my bad, I missed that, but I'm going to do better. I realize that may have let you down, and my goal is to do better going forward, and this is how I'm going to do it. Because again, back to that trust conversation, we're not going to have trust if we don't change the process. One thing that continues to be a hot topic and big topic is the challenges and benefits of remote and hybrid team dynamics. So obviously we've seen massive shifts back to being hybrid or in person, but we still have a lot of people that are remote, and a lot of people are happy being remote, right? But we really have to have best practices in place to ensure that remote teams if we don't have eyes on people, how do we make sure that we're maximizing productivity, that we have they're engaged, that they're showing up and happy to be there? Are there any best practices that any of you have for tracking remote or hybrid teams to ensure that things are getting done and that they feel connected, that they feel like they're part of the team? I work from home. It's very easy for me to just come in and not have calls all day, and then I feel very isolated. Right? Like, where's my team? So any best practices that any of you, I'll open this one up to any of you that you see work really well for managing those remote teams.
I like personally, we have a rule of if someone sends you a note or a message, you have X amount of time to respond. And I just think that's just good, a good adulting for one, let alone being a professional. So I really like that. And then I also like to start, I don't like Monday morning meetings. I actually hate them, but I think it's good because it gets everybody on the same page about, what the priorities are and what's going to happen that week. So that way you can be a grown boy and girl and get your work done without somebody breathing down your neck.
Right. Yeah. My weekly team calls on Monday at 12 o'clock. So we don't do early. I'm East Coast and someone on my team is West Coast. So we have time to work with, but I wait until 12 o'clock. So that way it's not a first thing Monday morning, but our week with that team collaboration, which is really important. Denise or Toni, anything you'd add to that on the best practices for managing remote teams?
I was just going to say that I think it is imperative that leaders, regardless of whether they have a remote workforce or not, stop managing by sight and manage by what we talked about at the very beginning. What is the goal? What does it look like when it's done? And to manage and to evaluate performance based on our people meeting the metrics that we set in place. This is the goal. This is how we know we're going to, we're on, I do a 3-step goal setting. What does it look like when we're done? SMART, whatever it is. What are the things we have to touch to know that we're on track? And at the end, yes, no, that's it. Did we hit it or not? If we didn't, why not? Very simple, one piece of paper, 3 questions, everybody knows it. Ask them in your Monday or bi-Monday huddles, whatever it is. And it allows people to feel autonomous, but it also holds them accountable. And I wanted to say that there's somebody who has a question in the chat, and I don't want to lose time in terms of that person's question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Toni, go ahead while she looks it up.
I'll just add a small part. I work remotely, but I work with people who work in person or maybe hybrid or also remote. So for our team chats for our projects, I use Microsoft products. So I use a digital Kanban board because I don't like micromanaging people. So I write what's supposed to be done. I tag who's supposed to have done it, and I encourage people. It's brand new. So I encourage people to write or to send me a chat saying what you've done. So I'm not having to have so many different meetings asking people, what are you doing today? Like, just, we're adults. We should be adulting, and just let people know what's going on with your project.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Love that. Thank you for sharing. So there is a question in the chat. Sorry, I totally missed this question coming in. But the question is, what are tools for building teams in polarized environments? Anybody want to jump in there? I'll open it up. If not, I can call on one of you as well. But anybody have anything initially come to mind with tools to help build teams in polarized environments?
I'll just take a stab at it. When you say, I guess the person who asked the question, when they say polarized, do they mean, like there's friction within the overall organization? Because I was going to say, if that's the case, a climate assessment off the bat, and get those findings and those results, and then, from there, build the team based around, what was uncovered within that climate assessment. And that's just something that's really big, big in the military. And I feel like, I know it works as, they probably call it an audit on the civilian side, but, something that works, getting an assessment of, what's going on within that culture. Like, why is it polarized?
I try not to have meetings without of everybody being in the same room. I try not to contribute mess to the mess. So if there's an issue going on, we all have a huddle together so we can all talk about it. I don't want to talk about it with one person and then try to track another person down because I have really bad memory sometimes. So just get everybody in the room. When I was in person, we would get everybody in the room. We stand up together, 5 minutes or less, and we say, like, this is what's going on, and then this is what we can do moving forward.
And then I say, start with the root cause. Why is it polarized? Is it polarized because the two heads of the organization can't stand each other or have conflict among themselves? And then how is that affecting the team? If they're polarized because of misunderstandings, I think it was Toni that said earlier about the end-to-end process and looking at it. One of the best examples of what you can do is if you have a group of people who've worked those along that process, get them in a room and ask them 2 questions. What is it that you do that you love? What is it that you do when your work or the work that you receive isn't the way it needs to be so you can be efficient? And have that each person kind of talk about the pain and what happens when it doesn't happen. When I get your work and it's half done, when it's late, when you don't respond to my emails, and so now what you see is the contributing factors as well as the root cause of why the 2 teams are polarized. If it is a political power, I don't know whether this person is in charge and able to manage that higher upper, the fight between the 2 of them, but I would definitely put it on a climate survey employee engagement survey, because a lot of companies will do that. And I would call out that, we're not working and say it in this way. We are not optimized because these 2 leaders do not get along, and it's causing us to be inefficient in our organization.
Right. Again, back to that root cause, right? What's the cause of it? And then how do you bring people together to solve? There's another question here. Can you share the virtual Kanban board you used? Did somebody mention?
I did.
Okay.
Microsoft Loop. They have a whole suite of templates. They have, if you're a Scrum Master, they have a Scrum board. You can have a Kanban board. You have a to-do list. There's a project management tracker. They are building out Loop to be more, I don't know, I'm not Microsoft. So they're just building it out. They're constantly adding features, and I thoroughly enjoy it. You can add different colors to it. You can use a temperature check with your team and have them, whenever they go and they check in, and say, how are you feeling about this project today? You have an intro page. You have a workspace for the team within Loop. And you can integrate your Microsoft Planner or your project plan into it as well. Like, everything can go into Loop if you have access to it.
All right.
Mhm.
Wisdom is the tool. So we only this hour flew by. I love this conversation.
Yes.
Like there's so many great lessons learned and tips and resources. I'm gonna do a final wrap up question to kind of close us out here. There's actually two questions in my section on lessons learned. So the first question: what are some of the most important lessons you've learned from leading high impact cross functional teams? And then if you could give one piece of advice to someone new to leading cross-functional teams, what would it be? Givonna, I'll start with you to wrap us up here.
Just understand the importance of clear communication and the importance of diversity. And then just understanding that, you don't know it all. You don't know everything and you can't know everything. And that's when you connect with your team, be vulnerable within that space as a leader and, embrace what you don't know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Toni, any final thoughts there on those questions?
I'm a young leader and I'm still understanding the clash of values between others, myself included. So I would say for people like myself, be patient with yourself. Some days you may get really frustrated. Like I cry so much when I'm frustrated. It's ridiculous. I get up to here and I just start crying. So if you need to cry, but it's okay. And just keep doing what you need to do. If you need to involve a senior leader, ask for help because it's not, I'm learning it's not my position to tell a senior leader what to do. I need to tell someone else. So seek out a mentor who can help you communicate what should be done next.
Mm-hmm. And that's that. I don't often play on IAW community when we have these conversations, but that's one area where the IAW membership community can be really helpful, right? Hey, I'm having this problem. I don't want to talk to my boss about it. I don't want to talk to somebody at work. Who can I talk to? And I can remember being very early in my career struggling with that. Who do I have that I can go talk to, right? Mm-hmm. And so I plug the IAW community when I can, and that's one of those powerful things that comes out of IAW. All right, finally, Denise, over to you for lessons you've learned, but also one piece of advice for those that are new to leading.
I think the biggest issue is not to try to let go of perfectionism, period. And to embrace the fact that you can leverage the fact that you're new to being a leader and you can leverage your journey along that by simply building relationships, by asking people, hey, I don't know how to do this. And to remember that the things that people did, even as much as 15 years ago, are not the things that we need to be going and doing in the future. So no one really has a handle on this whole where are we headed kind of thing. And so take the advice with a grain of salt, because people will always tell you their advice based on their past experience. And you have to be able to ask the question of what's the root cause to this.
Absolutely. Well, ladies, I want to say a very special thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and took so much away. I actually have notes in here to take back to my team. So love when that happens. For those that joined us live, thank you for those great questions. I love getting questions from our audience. I love knowing that you're here, you're connecting with us. In that attachment section are connections, links to all of us on LinkedIn. So go connect if you have follow-up questions. Hopefully we will see you back here in 2 weeks for another panel discussion. But in the meantime, please reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help support you. Thank you, ladies. Loved this conversation. Fantastic day, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.